everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, TYT Nation. I'm your host, Jeff Waldorf. Welcome. Got a great show for you guys today. We're going to cover a lot of different stuff. We got Hillary's book, Going After Bernie. Oh boy, here we go on that one. Hey, let's go relitigate the 2016 election. Wonderful. Let's do it. We also have a new poll on corporate tax cuts related to Trump's new push today to corporate taxes to about 15%. We'll talk about that. We have NAFTA negotiations. Canada asking for, no, not asking, demanding something of the United States, a concession. We'll talk about that as well. What could Canadians possibly want? We'll go into detail on that. Then, of course, we do have a couple of Trump stories about DACA. And then finally, Hurricane Irma. Is Hurricane Irma, or the fear surrounding Hurricane Irma, a ploy to sell batteries and water? Rush Limbaugh thinks he has the answer. We'll talk about that. So fun stuff that we have today. And as far as anybody that could be in the path of Irma, hopefully, definitely hope for the best. I don't really send thoughts and prayers, because we're not Republicans over here, but know that if anything happens, we will do our best to help you out. So, and please stay safe. So if you're in the path of Irma, please stay safe. Okay. Anyway, so there's that. Before we get into the stories, let me thank some patrons. Patreon.com/TYTNation. We have, let's see, Linda Taylor, the first storm and the last, Jane Lucy, Linda Mitchell, Michael Cuomo, Sandy Lai, Norma, Mary Nelson, Wiley Harp, Karen Silt, Michael Miller, Charmaine Foltz, Swearner, Stanley Vogel, Michael Grabowski, Amy Valela, Diego Rosario, Erica Antillian, Adam Butler, Disco Phage, and Aaron Pepper. So thank you to all of those who I've just named. You guys help out the show by donating to us every month, keeping us independent on the air. So I want to thank you guys for that. If you want to sign up to help the show, patreon.com/TYTNation. There's also another way you can help out, and that's by sharing and liking the streams, so that more and more people can watch the show. Also, there's a great little thing called Super Chat that elevates your comments, and it also helps out the show in the same time. So I will read your comments during the show on air and respond to them. So use that Super Chat. It's super cool. That was incredibly, I don't know what the word for that was, but it was bad. It was bad. But anyway, tacky, I don't know. Just bad. Anyway, with that said, there's another way to contact us during the show, and that is using the hashtag TYTNation on Twitter. So that's also how you can contact us and let us know your comments, questions, all that stuff, and I will answer them when I'm able to, so during the show. All right. With that all established, let's start out with Hillary Clinton and her new book. Now, Hillary Clinton has a new book coming out, and in it she tries to explain what happened in 2016. Oh, this ought to be really, really good. Now, the book is not out yet. It comes out in September 12th, so about another week or so. But while it's not out, there have been excerpts that have been leaked. And boy, is she pissed. I mean, look, I would be very, very angry as well if the person I ran against called me crooked and started chants of lock him up, and talked about, you know, grabbing pussies, and then still ended up winning the election. I'd be a little steamed myself, right? So, of course, she's probably super mad at Donald Trump, right? Not so much. She's not mad at Trump, actually. She's mad at Bernie Sanders. But wait a minute, she beat Bernie Sanders in the primary and then went on to go against Donald Trump, where Bernie Sanders campaigned for her on her behalf. Well, here's what I'm going to do. We're going to decide to, we're going to plumb the depths of her rage and look at why she is decided to be so mad at Bernie Sanders, who, again, helped her campaign after the primary was over, backed her, told people to vote for her, and even went and did some campaign rallies for her in the general election. Now, according to Clinton, one of the main things is that Sanders apparently had impugned her character during the primary. Well, what do you expect? That's a primary. You kind of have to go after each other and look, I don't even agree that he impugned her character, right? But she believes that, and she says that that helped Donald Trump win the election against her. Now, here's a quote from this book that was linked by a pro-Clinton Twitter account. She said, "Because we agreed on so much, Bernie couldn't make an argument against me in this area on policy. So he had to resort to innuendo and impugning my character." Oh, that's hilarious. Again, I'm going to break down why that actually is not true. No, they were not close on when it comes to policy. Yes, they agreed generally on some things, but as far as specific policy is concerned, they're actually kind of far apart. On the left, there's a rift between the centrist policy and the progressive policy, which obviously was much more progressive. Now, she wrote that when I finally challenged Bernie during a debate to name a single time I changed a position or a vote because of a financial contribution, he couldn't come up with anything. That's funny because there was a lot there, but I remember that moment where, look, Bernie Sanders treated Hillary Clinton with kids' gloves. Ain't nothing compared to what Donald Trump unleashed upon her. Because, like I said, Bernie Sanders is too nice. He's too nice, right? Now, but she says, no, he wasn't too nice. He was so vile, so mean. In fact, his attacks caused lasting damage to my campaign, making it so much harder to unify progressives. No, you know what made it hard to unify progressives is the fact that the DNC cheated Bernie Sanders out of possibly winning the primary by all stacking behind you, who was actually a weaker opponent to Donald Trump. Look, Bernie Sanders, and I know some people say, oh, the polls are wrong. And in the case of Hillary Clinton, perhaps they were in some areas, right? Where she was slated to win Michigan. Obviously, she didn't. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, all that stuff. But see, those were close polls. It turns out that in the polling, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were pretty much neck and neck, while the whole contest, Bernie Sanders was beating Trump by double digits. Now, would that have went down during the election as the Republican attack machine would have made attacks against Bernie Sanders? Probably. He would have lost a few points, but he still would have been solidly ahead of Donald Trump. And again, Bernie Sanders is the most popular politician in America, and even if he suffered a couple of points of damage during the election, during a general election, he still would have done far better than Hillary Clinton. And that's not me saying that. That's like the data. That's extrapolating from the data, looking at what could have happened. So, and just based on his favorabilities, his popularity, the popularity of his policies, which again, right now are super popular. But I'll get into that stuff later. Now, she says. Now she said that. Again, these attacks from Bernie Sanders during a primary where you're actually supposed to attack your opponent in order to win. What, do you want him to not attack you? Then what the hell's a primary for? But again, a lot of these corporate Democrats, they hate primaries because they don't want to be challenged, especially from the left, because they know they don't do as well. Now, she says that it made it harder to unify progressives, as I just mentioned, and paved the way for Trump's crooked Hillary campaign. Well, okay. So, going back to that debate, right? I mentioned that there were times where, yes, she did change a position or a vote because of a financial contribution. And actually, this was pointed out by Elizabeth Warren during the campaign. In 2004, Warren, still a professor at Harvard, had written an op-ed about a piece of bankruptcy legislation supported by credit card companies that would have made it more difficult for families to go into bankruptcy. Warren wrote that the legislation would hurt women who were trying to compete with credit card companies to get child support from their ex-husbands. Clinton, when the First Lady saw the op-ed, invited Warren to meet with her after a speech in Boston. Now, Warren said about Clinton, I got to tell you, I've never had a smarter student. And she said, Professor Warren, we've got to stop that awful bill. Warren later said that she heard that there were skid marks in the hallways when Clinton returned to the White House to convince the administration to reverse course in the bill. And, of course, Bill Clinton vetoed that bill. Now, look, if that were the end of the story, then I would give a lot of credit to Hillary Clinton. But later on, when Hillary Clinton was elected to the Senate, she voted in favor of that same bill. Now, Warren, of course, criticized that by saying to Senator Clinton, the pressures are very different. She's taken money from the groups, and more to the point, she worries about them as a constituency. Now, overall, the Clintons have taken over $3 billion. That's in their pocket from different groups, from things like speaking fees and related to, you know, the presidency. So her family has taken a lot of money from outside groups. They've profited very handsomely. And of course, that means that whenever they're in power, they happen to be on the side of those groups when it comes to their policy priorities. Now, that would be one example, right? Now, what about policy? As I mentioned, do they agree on policy? Somewhat, but not really. Bernie Sanders, for example, wanted to use the government to break up too-big-to-fail banks. Hillary Clinton did not. She was also against a 21st century Glass-Steagall, which would basically put a wall between investment banks and commercial banks. Now, right now, without that wall, commercial or investment banks can use your depositor funds to go and gamble on Wall Street. Now, is that good? Do you want your money to go into a Wall Street casino? No, you put your money in the bank to keep it safe. If those banks make a bad bet, they lose your money. And then they end up getting taxpayer-funded bailouts like they did back in 2008. Now, again, Hillary Clinton, she's against putting that wall in. Bernie Sanders, massively in favor of it. So that's different on banking policy. And maybe another example of course, her going against policy because of who funds her. She got a lot of campaign contributions from Wall Street and actually also did a lot of Wall Street or speeches for Goldman Sachs that we still don't know what's in it, what she had said to them. But anyway, on policy grounds, there's more. Medicare for all, for example, Bernie Sanders wanted that. Hillary Clinton said that will never, ever happen. Sanders wanted free college for everybody. Hillary Clinton, during the primary, she said that she wanted people to work for their education. Of course, not only that, but Clinton at first was in favor of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Bernie Sanders, definitely against that. Now, of course, during the general, she moved a tiny bit to the left on some of those issues. Worked with Bernie Sanders to do a little bit more of a progressive college platform, but it was too little, too late. There's more. On policy, she writes, Jake Sullivan, my top policy advisor, told me it reminded him, this was Bernie Sanders, her talking to Bernie Sanders and his policies, from the 1998 movie, There's Something About Mary. A deranged hitchhiker says he's come up with a brilliant plan. Instead of the famous 8-minute abs exercise, he's going to market 7-minute abs. It's just the same, but quicker. Then the driver, played by Ben Stiller, says, why not 6-minute abs? That's what it's like in policy debates with Bernie. We would promise a bold infrastructure investment plan or an ambitious new apprenticeship program for young people. And then Bernie would announce basically the same thing, but bigger. On issue after issue, it was like he kept proposing 4-minute abs or no-minute abs, magic abs. No, that's not what happened. Bernie Sanders has been for these progressive policies for a lot longer than you have been for these other policies. You were a Goldwater girl while he was fighting for this kind of stuff and getting arrested during civil rights era. I'm just saying. Yes, it's good that you evolve to a more progressive position, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with politicians becoming more progressive as long as they actually mean it. Hillary Clinton, we don't know if she actually meant it. This characterization, completely off and absolutely ridiculous. Now, she continues writing, somebody sent me a Facebook post that summed up the dynamic in which we were caught. Bernie, I think America should get a pony. How will you pay for the pony? Where will the pony come from? How will you get Congress to agree with the pony? Again, Bernie Sanders had answers for all of these different questions. All of his policies were already paid for. And you could go and look that up. That was in the public record. Now, she continues with this sort of mock, or something, trying to mock Bernie Sanders, I guess, by saying, Bernie, Hillary doesn't think America deserves a pony. Hillary, actually, I love ponies. Bernie supporters, she changed her position on ponies. Which Hillary? Which Hillary? It's with which, W-I-T-C-H. Wow. So she's talking about ponies, right? First of all, look at the framing on that. Super right wing. That, of course, gives ammunition to the right wing. That's what the right wing says. Oh, the Democrats, all they want to do is just give out handouts and freebies to everybody and hand jobs, too, because those are awesome. No, that's not what we're doing. We're actually trying to do things like Medicare for all. You think Medicare for all is a pony? Medicare for all is, look, is a policy position that every other, or almost every other industrialized wealthy nation already has. It's been tried, and it works. That's what Bernie Sanders is trying to move us towards. Hillary Clinton didn't want that. She thinks that's a fucking pony. She thinks not having the banks ripping us off, that's a pony. She thinks an actual infrastructure plan is a pony, right? She thinks that a living wage is a pony. You've got to be kidding me. Look, this entire book, from what I can see, and I'm sure the rest of it is not going to be any different, reeks of bitterness and the same kind of condescension that has essentially doomed her campaign from the beginning. And this is her again saying, nothing is my fault. It's not my fault. I didn't lose. Everybody loves the establishment, but it was just that goddamn Bernie Sanders that made me lose to Trump. Well, if everybody loves the establishment, then how come you lost to Trump? Can't come up with the answer. No, it's Russia. It was Bernie Bros. It's sexism. It's all this stuff. For fuck's sake, man. In fact, she goes into that. The Bernie bro thing. She says, some of his supporters, the so-called Bernie bros, took to harassing my supporters online. Oh my God, someone was mean on the internet. Come on, dude. Really? Snowflake. Anyway, she said, it got ugly and a little more than sexist. Now, look, I'm not going to deny that there wasn't sexism, that there isn't sexism. Of course there's sexism. Of course, right? I'm not a Republican. I'm not going to admit that that doesn't exist, right? Oh, no sexism. What are you talking about? There's no sexism. There's no racism. There's no isms. In fact, white people, we're the victims. No, I'm not going to say that because that's ridiculous and it's completely untrue. Yes, there's sexism. Yes, that did play a little bit of a role in the campaign. Of course, some people online who were attacking her, yes, did so with sexist attacks, and yes, were sexist. That doesn't mean that it destroyed her campaign. Okay. And on to the point of Bernie Sanders and people who supported Bernie Sanders, people who are actual progressives, you think those people who are to the left of you are sexist? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. No, either they're too progressive or they're sexist, because you can't have both, right? You can't say that those people that are, oh, they're so far to the left, God, with all their free stuff and taking care of everybody with Medicare for all and allowing them to go to school for free, and they're also so sexist. No, that does not compute. Those two things are not equal. There's no equivocation going on here, but she tries to. Either they're sexist and racist or they're too liberal. You can't do both, okay? But look, this is an established pattern from Hillary Clinton's team. She did this in 2008 with President Obama. She attacked people who thought she was who thought she was too right-wing, right? Too establishment and too unlikable. She attacked them as sexist bros, right? And they ended up having their hacks and mainstream media call them the Obama boys. So this is the same thing all over again, that Bernie bro smear. And then not only that, but it actually gets even more ridiculous. Because this is the stuff we already knew, we already talked about. But this one's new. She actually accused Sanders of not wanting to win the Democratic primary. Or not even wanting Democrats to win. This is the most insane part. She writes, he isn't a Democrat. That's not a smear. That's what he says. But he didn't get into the race to make sure a Democrat won the White House. He got in to disrupt the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders, see, look at that. Not a Democrat. All he did was just come up, try to fuck up the Democrats. Really? That's what you believe? That he didn't want to win? You think a guy that defends Democrats, caucuses with the Democrats, votes with them, and is popular among them? Look, he has an 80% approval rating with Democratic voters. You think that guy came in to try to destroy the Democratic Party? That is fucking ridiculous. Look, the policies that he supports are supported by, guess what? A majority of Democrats and a majority of the country. Medicare, for example, 77%. Medicare for all, polling at 60%. Even high among Republicans. And yet you think he was there just to destroy and disrupt the Democratic Party. That is fucking ridiculous. You know what he did? He ran to save the Democratic Party. And that is the very thing he's still doing. And I know that frustrates probably a lot of you, a lot of progressives who think that he should stop wasting his time on the Democratic Party. Now, look, I disagree with them on that part. But look, if you're out there building a third party and you're out there creating your own movement, wonderful. I applaud your efforts to create a viable third-party option because, look, at the end of the day, we know that the two-party system is not serving the people. And eventually, we are going to have to move to a better system. But right now, I think the framework and the goal of the Justice Democrats, I believe that that's the best way. But, again, there's no guarantee that that will work. It is a risk. It is a gamble. Nonetheless, Bernie Sanders is somebody who's still working tirelessly to promote progressive ideals. Now, this is somebody that's traveled nonstop to places like West Virginia to push for these policies. And look, he's also inspired hundreds of politicians to run on those ideas. Now, if you're against Bernie Sanders or you're against those policies, look, you shouldn't be, okay? Again, they're super popular. And if you're coming at it from a centrist position, you got to look at how your positions poll with the American public versus the positions of Bernie Sanders and progressives. You're going to find that they're far more popular because people actually want them. And if you actually are interested in winning an election, then you would support those policies. But look, he's not disrupting the party, right? Now, maybe he's disrupting your party, your cocktail party, that is. The one that you have with all their rich friends and donors. But seriously, he's trying to save the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party, again, doesn't seem very interested in doing so because follow the money, right? Now that leads me to my last excerpt here that I have. And she writes, quote, "I'm proud to be a Democrat, and I wish Bernie were too." Look, she has not learned anything. And to be honest, I believe Hillary Clinton is far more disruptive to the Democratic Party than Bernie Sanders. Again, Sanders is the most popular politician in America. He's got a 60% approval rating. Trump is at 41%. He's deeply unpopular. He's underwater. He has not changed very much. Actually, he has changed. He has went down in popularity. And yet here is Hillary Clinton at 39%. She is sitting underwater right next to Trump. If you want to blame anyone for the loss of Hillary Clinton, you should probably blame Hillary Clinton. Okay. I realize that was a long segment. But you know, some things just have to be said. All right. Let's move on here. Now, President Trump has begun his push to cut corporate taxes, by coming up with the, of course, fallacy that a lot of Republicans use, that the United States happens to be the highest have the highest corporate tax in the world. Now, he tweeted that we will be going north to North Dakota today to discuss tax reform and tax cuts. We are the highest tax nation in the world. That will change. Now, that is wildly untrue, as I'm about to show you. According to data compiled in 2015 by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, it shows that the U.S. is way behind countries such as the U.K., Germany, and France in terms of taxes. Now, turns out that America has one of the lowest tax revenues by GDP percentage out of the 34 countries and is basically in the middle for tax revenue per capita and corporate tax revenue. The data also shows that the U.S. has below average income tax rates. So this whole baloney about us being, oh, we're the highest taxed nation in the world, we got the highest corporate taxes, that is untrue, demonstrably untrue. Okay. Now, this, of course, is something that Republicans will continue to say in their quest to cut corporate taxes. So how do the American people feel about this? Now, it turns out they're not very enthused about a giant corporate tax cut. Now, Trump, as I said, he wants to cut the tax rate to about 15%, right? That's the corporate tax rate. Now, Politico, in their new Morning Consult poll, asked about this, and they found that 6 in 10 respondents actually said that, no, we don't need to cut corporate taxes. We need to raise corporate taxes because corporations, they do not pay enough. Now, that is, of course, 6 in 10, that's 60% of Americans. Now, tax cuts for individuals, however, which Trump and Republicans say they're in favor of are actually far more popular in this poll. 74% of those polled say that they support tax cuts for the middle class. Yeah, of course. Now, we've looked at the Republican tax plan, and yes, they claim, oh, we're going to cut taxes for the middle class. Middle class is going to be great. We're going to have so much growth. You're going to save so much money. Now, it turns out that's not true. The lion's share of the benefits of that tax plan will go to the top 1%. Let me get some of the numbers here, right? Now, on average, if you're making less than $24,000 a year, you will get a total tax cut of about $50. Wow. Man, that, woo, massive tax cuts. That's going to spur some, a lot of spending. You could go to a movie. Now, if you're middle class, a little bit better, right? You will save about $260 to about $410 per year. Now, in total, that is a 0.5% of a reduction in your total tax rate that you pay. Wow. Man, that is a huge tax cut for the middle class. Woo. Now, let's get to the top 1%. The top 0.1%. If you're in that top bracket, you will see a 16.9% change in after-tax reduction on your taxes. That means you will save an average of $1.2 million a year under this plan. A tax cut for the middle class? Not really. What this is, of course, when they say they're, oh, we're going to cut taxes, it's going to benefit the middle class, what they really mean is we're going to cut taxes for the rich, and it's going to benefit the rich. It's a giant boon for them, for the 1%, and with a few scraps thrown in for everybody else to make it more palatable. Now, none of this mentions the other programs that will benefit the poor and the middle class and how they're going to be devastated by the cuts in funding. Okay. Now, more from this poll. They also asked about the estate tax. Eliminating the estate tax drew support from a majority of respondents, 55%. Now, and as I mentioned before I get into the details of that, 61% of say that upper income people pay too little in taxes, while 40% say they pay too much. Now, again, how this ties in, we'll think about it, right? Why is support for eliminating the estate tax so high when in reality, most people are never going to pay it? You see, that's very interesting. So most people are like, oh my God, don't do the death tax. Don't do the estate tax. Let's get rid of it. Let's get rid of it. Wait a minute. You're not paying that tax. Oh, but turns out most people don't actually know that. Now, let me tell you who actually pays the estate tax. According to a 2015 report from Congress's Joint Committee on Taxation, roughly 0.2% of all Americans, or 1 out of every 500 people, will end up actually paying the tax. Not only that, but the households affected fall somewhere between the 95th and 99th percentile of all U.S. households, according to the Wall Street Journal. The top 1% of households that have a net worth of $6.8 million, while the top 5% have a net worth of at least $1.9 million. Those are the households that are going to pay the estate tax. And yet, Republicans seem to have convinced people that they are going to pay the estate tax, the people in the middle class. In reality, this affects, as you can see, a very small percentage of Americans. Basically, here's where you see the power of the right's messaging, right? They've convinced people that these taxes don't actually impact the super rich, but they affect most of everyone, which really they don't. In fact, you have to be incredibly wealthy to be hit by this. And I think when you explain that to people, they generally agree and go, oh, well, I didn't realize that. Now, like the poll indicates, most people actually think that raising taxes on the rich is a good thing, that we actually want them to do that. So, now, not only that, but most people, unsurprisingly, say that the middle income pays too much in taxes. That 60% and 52% said low-income people also pay too much in taxes. Those things I think are both true. But nowhere do they say why that is. Well, it's because the wealthy for years have been cutting their own tax rates. And in that time, taxes on the middle class have actually gone up. This isn't rocket science. It doesn't take a genius to figure this out. When the rich don't pay more, you end up paying to make up the difference. Now, maybe you don't pay more in effective taxes, right? But you end up paying more in lack of services or even privatized services, which of course make a profit that will, end up having you pay more out of pocket. Either way, the wealthy have found a way to leave you holding the bag, also that them and their donors can save millions of dollars. This tax cut push is not for you. It is for them. And they're going to make sure that they get their tax cuts no matter what. Okay. I'm going to take a quick 2-second break. We'll be right back. Stay right here. Alright, back around the nation here. Sorry about that. Just needed to get something real quick. Okay. Now, let's see. Raven says, Obama ran a tougher campaign against Hillary Clinton than Bernie Sanders did. She shouldn't be mad at Bernie, but she has to have someone to blame, because she certainly isn't going to take the blame for herself. Aaron Likes Words tweets in, HRC book goal seems to further split the Dems. Does she want Republicans to win in 2018? Or is this narcissistic self-justification? Aaron, I think it is the latter, unfortunately. I think she believes that she did nothing wrong in the election and that it was essentially stolen from her, whether it be stolen by the Russians or stolen by, Bernie Sanders or sexists or something like that. It's all to avoid coming to the realization that the establishment is no longer in charge, that the establishment is no longer preferred by the American people, and that we're really tired of it, and that we want to change. There are some people that can no longer accept when they're no longer liked. But anyway, let's move on. We got more stories to go. Let's talk about Canada. Our fun neighbors from up north. All right. Now, Donald Trump promised to renegotiate NAFTA to be more friendly to the American workers. Now, I'm not opposed to that idea. And actually, I gave Trump credit for ending the TPP, which would have been a disaster for American workers when it came to trade. Now, what a worker-friendly agreement would look like under a Trump or a Republican administration, I don't necessarily know. And I don't think we'll ever know because something like that is not likely to pass a Republican Congress. Nonetheless, Trump is renegotiating NAFTA. They're actually working on that. They're talking to both Mexico and Canada. And Canada has decided that they would use these negotiations to demand something of the United States. Now, what are they asking for? Are they asking for more American investment? Are they asking to tighten the border between Canada and the United States in order to prevent American refugees from fleeing the Trump administration? No. Actually, it turns out that Canada is demanding that the United States eliminate what is called right-to-work legislation. Now, this is according to the Canadian Globe and Mail. One group of negotiators spent all day Sunday working on the labor file. One source familiar with the discussion said Canada wants the United States to pass a federal law stopping state governments from enacting right-to-work legislation. The source has said the United States has not agreed to such request. I'm not surprised. Now, according to Christine Owens, executive director of the National Employment Law Project, a total of 28 states, including 3 this year, have passed what is known as right-to-work legislation. Now, she says that is a sledgehammer that dilutes worker organization and bargaining, paving the way for lower wages and a host of labor violations. So that's what she says about right to work. Now, what it actually does in practice, I guess, is that, well, that's what it does in practice. This is what it does in theory. It allows workers in unionized shops basically to not pay union dues but still get benefits. So kind of freeload, right? At least that's how I view it. Now, I know some people are like in favor of that because they don't want to pay into union dues. Some people might not like being part of the union. Some people don't want to be a part of the union. They think that maybe unions no longer have a use and that they only protect lazy workers and they give their money to the Democrats or your money to the Democrats more specifically, and they're against that as well. Now, while they do give money to the Democratic Party for the most part, and there certainly are some cases that unions will protect lazy workers, overall, the good that they do vastly overshadows the bad. And that's, of course, borne out by, like, you just look at the data, right? Well, when we had stronger unions, people were, on average, they were paid better. They actually had better benefits, and companies also did fairly well. I mean, companies still thrived when there were strong unions. We still had industry, we still had commerce, we still had people taking risks, being entrepreneurs and creating businesses. We still had jobs. So, however, since the decline of unions, starting in the Reagan administration, we've actually seen an increase in the CEO to worker pay gap. Now, instead of making about 30 to 40 times what their workers make for taking the risks of running a business, and that seems fair, we're now seeing CEOs make over 300 times the rate of their workers, which again, that's a massive, massive pay gap. Okay. There are also less benefits going to those workers, less pay, more executive compensation. It's not an accident. Now, right to work, that legislation, it already takes the unions, which are vastly disempowered from what they once were. They're not a powerful force in American politics, and they're certainly not a huge force in the workplace anymore. In some places, they still have some sort of a presence. But overall in America, union membership have shrunk dramatically, right? Now, what this would be, a federal right-to-work legislation, it would be the final nail in the coffin for worker representation. And it just so happens that Republicans have introduced that sort of legislation. It would make right-to-work the law of the land. So, now, I don't think that's the right way to go. I disagree with that. Worker representation, I think, is necessary for all sides to come to a fair and equitable agreement. When you give corporations all the power, what do you think they're going to do? They're not going to look out for your best interests. No, you have to have a group of people that are looking out for your best interest. They're going to look out for their own, okay? And look, you don't have to imagine what happens without unions. We have places, first of all, if we have a history, you can look at that. And there are also places across the world that don't have organized labor or worker protections. These are places like Bangladesh and China, Vietnam. They routinely have workplaces that are not safe, safety rules that are not enforced, and a lot of them have sweatshop conditions where they end up paying workers very, very little. And no benefits, no protections, and just really terrible working conditions, right? Now, the Republican Party kind of wants to return a little bit to that. Not necessarily to sweatshop conditions, but I think they want to deregulate the market and basically let these companies run their workplaces however they want without worker representation. They want to crush the unions. So now we need to go the opposite way. We actually do need some stronger unions so that we can return to that balance. Now, that's important. I don't think we're going to do it, but it is rather nice of Canada to demand this. It's very, very Canadian of them to look after their American neighbors. So appreciate the gesture. I'm not sure it will go anywhere, but well done, Canada. Well done. Okay. Let's go with DACA. Now, yesterday, Donald Trump outlined his plan to eventually rescind DACA. That's the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. Now, that was, of course, started by the Obama administration in order to allow children of undocumented immigrants who were brought here to live here as children to still live and work in the United States without fear of being deported. Now, Attorney General Jeff Sessions yesterday told reporters that they would no longer be processing new applications and that in 6 months that program would end, while saying that Congress, well, you can work on your own DACA replacement. That's not our job. It's not the federal, it's not the executive branch's job. That's Congress's job. So figure out something, okay? Now, Trump, for his part, tweeted, "Congress, it's time to do your jobs." So, look, that's publicly, right? Publicly, Trump is against, or at least was against DACA as it stood, and the administration says, "Well, it's just unconstitutional. We've got to have it go through the Congress." Okay. Now, privately, Trump might have actually been very confused about what this whole order meant. Now, the New York Times reported on Tuesday that administration officials privately raised concerns as late as 1 hour before the announcement about Trump's understanding of the effects of rescinding DACA. They expressed concern that Mr. Trump might not fully grasp the details of the steps he was about to take, and when he discovered their full impact, would actually change his mind. According to a person familiar with their thinking, who was not authorized to comment on it and spoke on the condition of anonymity. Now, that's very interesting. Or at least it would be if we had a normal president. Instead, we have somebody who doesn't read policy. Policy bores him. It's got to be delivered in tweet-sized length, or less than a half a page with graphics and maps, and his name sprinkled throughout it. Otherwise, he won't read it. He's just bored. Okay? Now, instead, Trump watches Fox News. Now, Fox News, they happen to not be in favor of DACA, as a lot of the right wing is. Now, what's ironic about this situation is that once on Fox News, Trump had spoken in support of Dreamers. Now, this was back in 2011. I'm going to show you that clip here.
You asked Michelle to actually physically go across the street and tell the family of 25 years to get out of this country, she wouldn't do it because she's a good person.
But here's the problem with Mitt Romney in this situation. He came out and say it's a magnet and he disagrees. But in 2007, he was calling for the same exact thing. Newt Gingrich fired back and said, here's your clip from Meet the Press from 3 years ago. Does that bother you?
Well, actually, he didn't strongly disagree. And in fact, a lot of people are really curious as to when he'll say something because, you know, I just saw something on television where they were saying that he really hasn't taken a stance or a very strong stance yet, and he hasn't said anything about what Newt said. So let's see what he says. But look, this is a matter of this isn't conservative. I'm the world's most conservative person. This isn't conservative. This is compassion.
Is it amnesty?
I guess to a certain extent, for a very limited number of people, it would be considered amnesty. But how do you tell a family that's been here for 25 years to get out?
That's tough.
Or if their kids are born here, they stay, the parents leave, and that's what Newt Gingrich's contention is. How can you be the party that is pro-family and dividing the family?
That's a good question. How can you be pro-family when you're dividing the family? Now, apparently, Fox News is singing a different tune. As is at least most of the administration. Now, I want to show you one more clip here. Again, this is one of Trump's past statements. This is when he was on Squawk Box on CNBC. Let's watch.
As an example, you have people in this country for 20 years. They've done a great job. They've done wonderfully. They've gone to school. They've gotten good marks. They're productive. Now we're supposed to send them out of the country? I don't believe in that, Michelle, and you understand that. I don't believe in a lot of things that are being said.
Again, that's very interesting to have that position. Now, yesterday, he also promised to revisit the issue within 6 months if Congress doesn't do anything. Again, very interesting. Now, what do I think about this? A little confusing, to be honest with you, because, again, he says one thing, he does another. But what if this entire thing, and again, this is a hypothetical question, what if this is just Trump brand incompetence? Maybe he doesn't actually understand the policy. Maybe he doesn't understand what it means. Maybe he's being pressured by conservatives, and that, you know, maybe it's true that the fact that those 10 conservative governments were planning on suing the Trump administration over DACA put him into an untenable position. Who knows? Maybe he actually is okay with Dreamers and thinks that Congress will actually do something. Look, that's not far-fetched because, again, Trump doesn't understand how Congress works and how little can actually get done within 6 months. So, look, I'm being incredibly kind here. I'm being unseasonably kind to the Trump administration, but this is based on the information I have. Now, that still doesn't mean that I don't think Trump is racist. I do think he's racist. But I also think that it's possible that his decision to end DACA is less about blatant racism and more about maybe other factors, okay? I mean, the New York Times also reported that just after the angry reaction to Trump's decision, the president appeared to have second thoughts. In a late evening tweet, Mr. Trump specifically called on Congress to legalize DACA, something his administration's officials had declined to do earlier in that day. I don't know. So there is that. So whether or not this is incompetence or pressure, I don't know. But if incompetence is your best defense that you have against ending the a program that defends people brought here through no fault of their own and have since grown to become successful and productive Americans, well, that's fairly bad. Okay. Now, at the worst, of course, ending this program is cruel and racist. At its best, it's because the president, while still also kind of racist, is also really dumb. I don't know. One way or the other, you decide. Okay. Now, that might be how Trump feels about it. His administration is something else. And we're going to go to that. Now, recently, the Trump administration put an end to the DACA program that defends children of undocumented immigrants that were brought here through no fault of their own from deportation. Now, in a statement released on the heels of Attorney General Jeff Sessions' announcement that the Trump administration will rescind the program, Trump called on the Congress to act. He said the legislative branch, not the executive branch, writes these laws. That is the bedrock of our constitutional system, which I took a solemn oath to preserve, protect, and defend. I look forward to working with Republicans and Democrats in Congress to finally address all these issues in a manner that puts the hardworking citizens of our country first. So that's Trump's statement on that. Now, look, for me, sending it to Congress was a stupid idea. I have no faith in Congress. And nobody has faith in Congress. Okay? Look, why do you think Obama did DACA the way that he did? It's because Congress was very, very unlikely to pass anything that protects immigrants, even immigrant children. Okay? Now, I don't think that Trump understands that. I think he's a simpleton. I think he's very incompetent. But the people around him, I think they do understand that. And just wait till you see what they're actually planning to use DACA for. Now, this is a video from a press briefing with Sarah Huckabee Sanders about the program. Let's take a look at that.
Would the president sign a standalone DACA extension?
Again, I've addressed this. The president is hoping to work with Congress on responsible immigration reform, and I laid out the priorities that the administration has on that front.
And so the president's voiced and you voiced some objections to the constitutionality of DACA. Where does the president stand on the program itself?
I think that in the answers that I've given is that the president has been, and I think part of the reason that this is complicated and one of the reasons he's wrestled with this back and forth in large part is because this is not an easy one. And certainly something where he wants to be able to make a decision with compassion, but at the same time, you can't allow emotion to govern. And this has to be something where the law is put in place, and it's something that he would support if Congress puts it before him.
He would support it if it came with, I'm just trying
again,
to get the
responsible immigration reform. We can't just have one tweak to the immigration system. We need really big fixes and big reform in this process, and we've laid out the principles that we feel are important in that. John.
Okay, so it sounds like they're planning to use the nearly 1 million people who have built lives in America through the DACA program as a bargaining chip for immigration reform. Uh-oh. Now, what does that entail? Well, you're about to find out.
It sounds like the president is saying, and you're saying, that if we're going to allow the Dreamers to stay in this country, we want a wall. Is that accurate?
I don't think that the president's been shy about the fact that he wants a wall, and certainly something that he feels is an important part of a responsible immigration reform package.
Can I ask you one follow-up?
Oh, so that's what it's about. The Trump administration wants to use this program for the wall. I mean, hey, look, if you don't build this wall that we want, we're going to deport nearly 1 million people who have families, jobs, and businesses. We're going to rip families apart, man. Now, if this is not an incredibly grotesque way to play politics, I don't know what is. I mean, I know what you can't call it. Heart. Full of heart. Pro-family. There's nothing pro-family about, again, threatening to rip apart these families. Furthermore, in addition to the stupid, unnecessary wall that Trump wants to build, the administration also supports an immigration bill that gives English speakers preferred status while sharply reducing the levels of legal immigration. And that's arguably the point. Either way, if they, get help with the Democrats on immigration reform on their plan, or the Democrats don't work with them and DACA ends up running out, the whole result is that millions of people will end up still getting kicked out of the country. And for a lot of Republicans, that's a win. That's where they're coming from. Okay. One more here. It hasn't been long since Hurricane Harvey slammed into Texas, and there's still a lot of people that are cleaning up, rebuilding from that area. It's going to take years and years and billions of dollars to rebuild after Harvey. And now we have another hurricane that is poised to possibly hit Florida. Now, this is a Hurricane Irma. Now, to some extent, we're in hurricane season, so this is normal, right? We do expect storms. And look, Floridians, they ride out these kind of storms all the time. However, Irma is now incredibly powerful. In fact, it's a Category 5, okay? And is now actually considered the second strongest storm ever witnessed in the Atlantic. So that's pretty serious, right? Now, forecasters I guess they disagree on whether or not it will definitely hit the United States. But a lot of people, they're rightly concerned. Since, look, Category 5s are the strongest storm, they're potentially catastrophic for anybody who's caught in the way. So this is very, very serious. Now, with that in mind, here comes Rush Limbaugh, right? Now he's telling people, oh, don't be so worried about the storm. In fact, you should be less worried about the storm and more worried about big business trying to scare you into buying stuff. This is interesting. Now, in his show, he said, here comes a hurricane. Local media goes on the air. Big hurricane coming. Oh, my God. Make sure you got batteries. Make sure you got water. It could be the worst ever. Have you seen the size of this baby? It's already Cat 5. Oh, my God. My God. It's bigger than the island of Haiti. Oh, my God. People run to the stores. They stock up everything. And they hoard and they end up with vacant stores. Nothing there. And it's a big success. How's that a success? TV stations got eyeballs. The advertising businesses have sold out of business. Got to restock and the cycle repeats. Oh, so that's it, huh? So this is just all the fault, all the hype about Hurricane Irma after Texas just got slammed is all to try and sell stuff. It's a ploy to sell batteries and water and gas. That's Rush Limbaugh. Okay. Now there's more, but look, the weather reports right now, again, they're tentatively talking about landfall. They're being very careful not to scare people. Okay. And they acknowledge that responsibility that yes, it does have a certain amount of chance, a certain percentage chance of hitting landfall. So yes, it does not hurt to be prepared. Now, that's not ridiculous. It's being responsible. However, I would say that the ridiculous one here is Rush Limbaugh trying to make light of this and basically saying, oh, it's just a ploy, right? To get advertising dollars. This is ironic. It's super projection. But and battery makers and people who sell bottled water just to make tons of money off gullible people who are afraid. Again, projection, right? Look, I got news for you. The weathermen are not working with the battery and water cabal to sell more stuff off fear of storms. Okay, again, that's not what's happening. Projection, right? Look, the funny thing is that he belongs to a party filled with people who are prepping for the literal apocalypse. Look, you got Jim Baker, for example, right? Jim Baker ain't nobody's liberal, okay? He sells emergency food buckets for the apocalypse. Again, projection, right? But it gets worse than this, right? Much worse. As now he's going to bring in climate change. You'll love this. He says, people in all of these government areas are all hell-bent on proving climate change. No, actually we're not. We're not trying to prove climate change. It's already been proven, okay? What we're trying to do is we're trying to mitigate that so that climate change doesn't actually get worse. Not that he would understand. And he decides to get into even more projection. He said, you can accomplish a lot just by creating fear and panic. You don't need a hurricane to hit anywhere. All you need is to create the fear and panic accompanied by talk that climate change is causing hurricanes to become more frequent and bigger and more dangerous. And you create the panic, and it's mission accomplished, agenda advanced. Really, what agenda? To make sure that hurricanes don't become more frequent and more dangerous? Guilty as charged. You caught us. How dare we try to save more lives? How dare we try to protect the environment? Such a crime, all right? No, here's the projection, right? Look, Limbaugh, to Limbaugh and many on the right, the Democrats, they can't be right about anything. They have to be wrong about everything. You know why? It's because that's their core identity. They stand opposite to everything that the Democrats do, right? And not only that, but as I said before, they're afraid of what climate change means, not only when it comes to weather events such as hurricanes and storms and floods, but also the effect on their way of living. There are a lot of people that are very set in their ways and they're afraid to change. So what they do is, in order to avoid having to change their lives, they invent this massive conspiracy, or they buy into this massive conspiracy that involves 97 to 98% of the world's climate scientists who agree that climate change is happening. But see, they think that those scientists are being paid off by Al Gore and Big Solar in order to tax them more. See, that's what they believe. Now, here's the funny thing about that, right? Well, look, we could pitch a tax on rich people a lot easier than having to invent this whole gigantic conspiracy. Which, look, the bigger the conspiracy, the less likely it is to actually be true. So a lot of those tend to fall apart. But the thing is, on taxes, right? Again, I see this all the time. Al Gore, he just wants to tax you, right? Majority of people already think that the rich don't pay enough in taxes. If we wanted to raise taxes on the rich, and we had a government that actually responded to us, to the needs of the people, to the desires of the populace, then we would have raised taxes on the rich without having to create, as I said, this gigantic conspiracy. Now, again, that whole argument falls on its face. Now, one more from Limbaugh, and I want you to try not to laugh at the irony of this statement. He says, quote, "And after this entire screed, I wish that not everything that involved news had become corrupted and politicized. But it just has." So, massive projection here as well. Look, let me ask you, who politicized climate change again? Oh, right. It was the right wing. Look, all the Democrats said, all Al Gore said is that, hey, man, this is happening. Maybe we should actually fucking do something about it. And the right wing, led by politicians and funded by oil companies and fossil fuels, you know what they said in response? Piss off. We're not going to do anything to threaten the profits of our donors. Okay? You know why? Because if we threaten our donors, well, they're going to take their campaign donations away, and I'm not going to get paid. I'm not going to get reelected. So, look, we don't want it to be a political issue. I don't want to see it as a political issue. This isn't right and left, okay? And look, if there's any Republicans out there that accept the science and want to have a conversation about actual solutions, wonderful. I welcome them into the fold, right? And I'm serious about that. But here's what you have is you have political hacks like Rush Limbaugh that have made it very, very difficult for sensible Republicans to actually come forward and help us do something on the issue. And unfortunately, until those people get their courage, these politicians that they represent get the courage to buck their donors and the rabid members of the base that get whipped up by these pundits, unless that stops, it's not going to get any better. In fact, it's going to get worse. The storms are going to get stronger. The hurricane season will end up lasting longer, and regular people will end up will end up suffering more under something that we could have gotten together and actually worked to prevent. Okay. That's it. That's the ridiculousness of Rush Limbaugh, and that also is the show for today. So again, I want to thank everybody who tuned in. Make sure to give us a like. Make sure to give us a share if you can, if you enjoyed the show. If you want to support us, go to patreon.com/TYTNation. We'll be having some good interviews coming up as well. So stay tuned for that. Thanks, everybody. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow.